I want to start with something simple, not a definition, not a label, just a feeling. You're thinking about something small, a message, a conversation, a decision. And at first, it makes sense. You're just trying to understand it. But then something shifts. The thought doesn't end. It continues, expands, branches into possibilities. What do they mean? Did I say something wrong? What if I missed something? And suddenly, what started as a small moment feels bigger than it should. That's what overthinking feels like. But here's the part most people misunderstand. It's not just thinking too much, it's thinking without an off switch. Your brain doesn't know when enough is enough. It keeps going. Not because it wants to, but because it's trying to do something. Protect you. Because from your brain's perspective, more thinking means more control. If you analyze everything, you won't make mistakes. You won't be surprised. You won't get hurt. At least, that's the idea. So your brain keeps searching for certainty, for clarity, for the right answer. But the problem is, that answer doesn't always exist. And the more you search for it, the further it feels. So instead of solving the problem, you stay inside it, looping. There's also something else happening, something quieter. Over time, your brain starts treating thoughts like signals, not just possibilities. Warnings. Every small detail becomes something to analyze. A pause in a conversation, a change in tone, a delayed reply. And your mind reacts instantly, not because something is wrong, but because it might be. And that possibility is enough. So your brain fills in the gaps, creates scenarios, predicts outcomes, and suddenly, you're not responding to reality anymore. You're responding to what your mind imagines could happen. And that creates tension, because now you're dealing with problems that don't exist yet, but feel real. There's also a physical side to this. Your body reacts to your thoughts, your breathing changes, your muscles tighten, your focus narrows. Even though nothing is happening, your system acts like something is. And that's exhausting, because you're constantly active, mentally, emotionally, even when you're doing nothing. That's why overthinking doesn't feel like thinking. It feels like pressure, like your mind is always on, always searching, always trying to fix something, even when there's nothing to fix. And over time, that creates a habit, not just of thinking, but of needing to think, because your brain starts to believe that if you stop, something important might be missed, so it keeps going. But here's where things begin to change. Not by forcing yourself to stop thinking. That doesn't work. The more you try to stop a thought, the stronger it becomes, because your brain sees resistance as importance. So instead, the shift is different. You don't try to control the thought. You change your relationship with it. You start noticing it, not following it, observing it. There's a difference between thinking and watching yourself think, and that small difference creates space, because now, not every thought feels like something you have to engage with. Some of them can just pass, and at first, that feels strange, because your mind is used to reacting. But if you stay with that feeling, something interesting happens. The thought loses intensity, not because it disappeared, but because you didn't feed it, and over time, your brain starts learning something new, that not every thought needs a response, that not every possibility needs to be explored, that not every feeling needs to be solved, and slowly, that constant pressure begins to fade, not completely, but enough to notice something you haven't felt in a while. Space between thoughts, space between reactions, space between what you feel and what you do. And inside that space, there's something different. Clarity. Not the kind that comes from thinking more, but the kind that appears when you stop treating every thought as urgent. Because overthinking was never about intelligence, it was about control. And once you stop expecting your mind to control everything, it doesn't have to work as hard. And when that happens, your thoughts don't disappear. They just become quieter, more manageable. And for the first time, your mind isn't pulling you in every direction. It's with you, present, and calm enough to let you actually experience your life, not just think about it. And once you begin to experience that space, something else becomes clear. You were never trying to think too much. You were trying to feel safe. Because overthinking isn't random. It has a purpose. It's your mind's way of saying, if I understand everything, I'll be okay. But the problem is, understanding everything is impossible, so the process never ends, and that's why it feels endless. But when you step back, even slightly, you start to see something different. You notice how fast a thought turns into a story, how one idea becomes 10, how quickly your mind moves from what happened to what does this mean about everything? And that awareness is powerful, because now you can interrupt the pattern, not by stopping the thought, but by not continuing the story. You let the first thought exist, without building the rest, and that changes everything, because most of the pressure doesn't come from the first thought, it comes from what you add to it, the interpretation, the prediction, the conclusion. And when you stop adding layers, the intensity drops, not instantly, but noticeably. There's also something else that starts to shift, your tolerance for uncertainty. At first, even a small unknown feels uncomfortable. You want answers, clarity, resolution. But the more you allow things to stay unresolved, without forcing a solution, the easier it becomes. Not because you stopped caring, but because your brain learns something new. That uncertainty is not the same as danger. That not knowing doesn't automatically lead to something bad. And once that connection weakens, your mind doesn't need to work as hard. It doesn't need to fill every gap. It doesn't need to complete every thought. And slowly, you start responding differently. You still notice things, but you don't chase every possibility. You still think deeply, but you don't get lost in it. You still care. But you're not controlled by every outcome, and that balance is what changes how your mind feels. Not empty, not silent, but steady. And maybe that's the real shift. Not becoming someone who doesn't think, but becoming someone who isn't pulled by every thought. Because your mind was never meant to give you certainty. It was meant to help you navigate. And once you let it do that, instead of asking it to solve everything, it finally settles. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to give you something that overthinking never could. A sense of ease. Not because everything is figured out, but because it doesn't have to be. And in that moment, you're not inside your thoughts anymore. You're with yourself, present, grounded, and free enough to actually live instead of constantly preparing for life.